Thank you for joining us for the 10th episode of Housing Matters. Housing Matters is your go-to podcast for all things real estate. This podcast covers a wide range of topics to help you navigate the housing market with confidence. Whether you're buying your first home, looking to invest, exploring development opportunities, or more. Each episode features insights from industry experts, including mortgage professionals, developers, investors, economic development gurus, and more, to provide listeners with a valuable knowledge and practical tips to move forward. And today, we are really excited to have with us Tawni Whitney. Tawni Whitney was born right here in Maine, and that's where her values for the community service and resilience shaped her from an early age. After graduating from the University of Massachusetts, she pursued a career in social work, dedicating her efforts primarily to supporting adolescents separated from their families and placed in foster care. That's the work that my mom actually does right now. Her deep compassion for others continued to guide her personal and professional life as she later became the mother of three. Tawni is a busy bee. She founded Freeport Friends. It's a charity aimed at assisting people in crisis and supporting elders to age in place with dignity. And she was elected to the Freeport Town Council, where she quickly earned a reputation as a passionate advocate for her town's growth and well-being. And she played a pivotal role in leading the Downtown Revision Project, which sought to revitalize and strengthen the heart of Freeport. And today, Tawni serves as the executive director of the Freeport Chamber of Commerce and the director of business development for Freeport's economic development efforts. Her dedication to public service, economic development, and community well-being has made Tawni a key figure in shaping Freeport's future, and her leadership continues to inspire positive change across the region. Wow, that is a lot, Tawni. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. That's a very kind introduction. I appreciate it.
So you grew up in Lincoln, Maine. For those listening that don't know, that's way up north.
Even when I go home now and I still navigate, it will say, you'll be home in an hour, or you'll be in Lincolnville in an hour and 15 minutes. Even my navigation doesn't actually think I want to go all the way that far north to Lincoln, Maine. So yes, indeed, I did grow up far north.
So way up in Aroostook County, which has had kind of its own evolution, right? I mean, at one point in time, historically, the population was much higher, and you're among those who decided to kind of move on to other things, and you explored kind of a education outside of Maine and have since grown your career. But how does how does one land in Freeport, Maine from Lincoln?
Oh, it was dreamy. I grew up as a child in Lincoln, Maine, with the L.L. Bean catalog on my lap.
Oh, yeah.
You know, being so far north and at that time more isolated from the world, without cell phones and webs and cameras and all of this kind of stuff that we can easily keep connected with today. It was a little isolating up there, and I was just always so proud to be in the state of L.L. Bean.
Yeah.
And so it wouldn't take me long before I would start to navigate down to Freeport, and then explore all of the other wonderful opportunities that Freeport had.
Yeah.
So it was just always a dream of mine to go further south, and Freeport was just one of my favorite places growing up.
So for people who are listening to this that haven't been to Maine, what's Freeport like, and where is it relative to, let's say, Boston or Portland?
So yeah, we're 3 hours north of Boston, and we're on the water. Although you cannot see it from our main street. So Freeport has lots of outdoor opportunities. We have a mountain called Hedgehog Mountain.
Okay.
And we have the waterfront. You can eat on our waterfront. You can take a boat tour off our waterfront.
Where do you eat on the waterfront in Freeport?
We have one restaurant,
okay,
the Harrisseek Lunch and Lobster.
Oh.
Very cute. You can eat downstairs, or they have a really awesome deck on the top floor.
I'm going to have to go check that out.
Yeah, that you can sit and look out onto the harbor. It's wonderful.
So, Tawni, I want to talk a little bit about your time on the town council. Maybe you can talk to us about what that experience was like. And also, during that time, you went through the process of starting this revision plan for the community. What kind of precipitated that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So when I was asked to run to be on the town council, I was like, wait, why? Why would I be on the town council? Like, I'm not a lawyer or a doctor. And one of the members that was on the council at the time said that's exactly why. Like, we need all kinds of people on the council. And it was through the work, the charity work of Freeport Friends and knowing the community, which was why they thought I would make for a good counselor. My first year as a counselor, I was pretty quiet, just taking it all in. I would actually meet with our town manager before every meeting to go over the agenda in detail, because it was a big deal to me. You know, it was a big honor, and I knew how important that position was. So year one went by pretty quickly, and I took it very seriously. And then it was my wish to be on the Freeport Economic Development Corporation as a liaison of the town council.
Okay.
And again, I had to wait a year, but year two, I was able to be the liaison to the Economic Development Corporation. I knew that's where all the action was happening and was being born and all the ideas were being talked about. And I thought, that is so exciting. Like, to hear what might be coming to Freeport. I just couldn't wait to be a part of that. And so when I joined the Economic Development Corporation as the town council liaison, and started hearing from the group what the challenges were and what the needs were, it quickly came to be that we needed to start action. We needed to do something. Like, Freeport was not just going to fix itself. As lovely as it is, we needed we needed some help.
So being more proactive instead of reactive.
Right. So it was in partnership. The town council partnered with Freeport Economic Development Corporation to get funding to hire a consultant to do a downtown revision.
Okay. And this was during COVID?
This is just at the heels of COVID. And I think actually the timing was fantastic. If we're to say what the benefits that came out of COVID, we were starting to get back together again a little bit publicly, with some cautions, but people had time on their hands. And I think that's why part of the reason why we had such a great participation in the downtown revision. People were home still for the most part. We pivoted to do a lot of our engagement and community engagement work outside. It was fantastic. And again, we really brought the whole community together. And one of my favorite times, again, is very near the end of the pandemic. Elders, as you remember, got their shots first.
Yeah.
So I brought my elders together at the Harrisseekit Inn in the ballroom.
Okay.
It was so cool because they were like safe, I guess. And it was really nice to watch all of them together. And Chip Gray, who was the owner of the Harrisseekit Inn at the time, like, served snacks and wine and tea. And it was such an honor for me to look around the room, seeing them relaxed and having a good time, being taken care of, and being honored. Having them there so that we knew that we were going to capture what their wishes for the future of Freeport are.
Yeah. And out of that process came this revitalization plan. And what are some of the kind of core components of that? Well,
again, I'm on Housing Matters, so
Sure.
One of the number one things was what kinds of housing. It was clearly identified that we wanted housing, but what different kinds of housing Freeport should have. Also, what are other economic engines that would be beneficial for Freeport? That was identified as more experiential. One of the projects that we pulled from that was to do mountain biking.
Okay.
So we went through a process to try to get mountain biking trails in Freeport. We did that for a few years, and ultimately that actually did fail by one vote. Another cool one, we recognized that kids didn't have a kind of hangout space. We identified they were hanging out at CVS.
Isn't that the cool place to hang out?
Not really.
There used to be a red box outside of the CVS in Augusta.
Right, back when we still did that. Well, there's 2 park benches. So they go into CVS, they grab a soda or a box of candy, and that's sadly a spot for them. So not a great fix, but a little fix. We were able to put up a pop-up skate park. And it still functions today. And I love that park.
My friend Tobias Parkhurst is part of the Skating Association of Maine and getting involved in doing a lot of these pop-up parks around the state. And he mentioned how much he enjoyed really working with the town of Freeport. And
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Good. Yeah, I mean, it's not the most elaborate, but it's just great
a little thing, yeah.
Yeah, it's great to just, and it's a different, population of kids. Maybe you're not the star baseball player or what have you, and it's a great way to get out there, learn different skills. It's right in the open, so it's super safe. And that is again a pop-up. We learned the word pop-up during this downtown revision, but it's a great way to sort of test something to make it more permanent.
So more than just housing, outdoor recreation opportunities and so forth. I mean, though you were on the council and then now you're not on the council, if you could go back and be on the council again, what would you do?
Well, I didn't realize that being on the council gave you power.
Yeah.
I thought it was just an extension of service. So naively, I just like community involvement and community service, so I thought that that's what I was doing. But in hindsight, I guess I should have had a wish list of things I was hoping to bring across the finish line.
Yeah.
So if I were on there today, probably I would do things a little differently.
You can always go back.
No.
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 I'm done. Yeah, you're a recovering politician like me.
Oh, I also didn't think it was political. It wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Everything's political. You know that. So after your time on the council, you moved on to becoming the executive director of the Greater Freeport Chamber, right? How did that happen?
Well, I was lucky. I was still on the town council, and the position of executive director for the chamber came available. And I knew that I didn't want to carry on for another 3-year term, but I also felt a great responsibility. I had worked with economic development to initiate a downtown revision, and that plan was really just starting to get going, and it felt irresponsible to just be like, well, good luck.
Yeah.
I'm done. So I felt if I could take a role at the executive director of the chamber, it would allow me a hat to stay involved and help carry the downtown revision forward.
Do you find that the business owners because when I think of chamber, I largely think of business owners, business community, if you will, kind of being members, though I know that it's broader than that. Are they supportive of this effort from the plan, the revitalization plan?
I'm very connected with our business community, and our business community is waiting for us. They're waiting for us to get the downtown revision initiated. I have some businesses in town, for example, the Freeport Oyster Bar, that opened the Oyster Bar because he was inspired by what was to come of the downtown revision.
Huh.
And again, he thought opening a restaurant and then having housing come, it would be a perfect, population to support his restaurant.
What are kind of like one or two things that would help signal to that community that this plan is in action? What would that look like to them?
To which population?
To the business community. What you say, hey, he came because he saw the hope of the plan. What would signal to someone like that it's occurring? Is it housing being built? Is it more retail being open?
Part of that nod is actually my new role with the economic development. There were some changes, and we have a new town manager, and she made some changes that took our prior economic developer in-house to town hall. And with that structure change, it left some responsibilities that open where he would be way too busy with other important things to handle some of the business outreach. So I think that is where the business community can tell that we're moving to initiate the goals that we had set in the downtown revision by the town helping to free up an agent, and I'm acting in that role to to beat the drum that Freeport is moving forward and do that national, that outreach to national and regional retailers.
Yeah, see, this seems interesting approach, like an ambassador. This is the first time I've met you, and I can feel your enthusiasm and energy and excitement. And I know that there are some, but very few downtowns around Maine that are fortunate to have other ambassadors like you that are full of energy and pride for the community. But it seems historically the economic development departments have been more of kind of gatekeepers, like we're here and we'll help you navigate the rules that we've set up as a community, as opposed to being proactive and going out to the world, so to speak,
Yeah.
and being like, hey, we have these wonderful opportunities here. And oh, by the way, we've had a very thoughtful community process behind like saying that these are the things that we want to do. Come here.
Yeah, I think that the town manager did a good job in some of the structural changes she did, and like I said, that did open it up. So for the first time in decades, we really are able to start doing this work. They start, going out and saying, "Hey, have you ever thought about Freeport?"
Yeah.
So it's important. The way some of our storefronts were designed, it is for a larger user. So I think it is important that we start to do that outreach. I still feel that the formula that was best for Freeport regarding retail is a third local, a third regional, and a third national. So we still have room for some of those regional and nationals. We're doing a pretty good job with our local outreach and fitting those local stores in to Freeport. We just had a new one open right before Christmas called Mother Tree, which is like a vintage store. Super cool. So we're doing okay with the locals because we have access to them. But now having access to the regional and national, I think, is going to be a great momentum for us going forward.
Do the national players and maybe even the regional, but maybe more so the national, like the Gaps of the world or Patagonias or whatever, I mean, do they have concern about labor issues, like actually being able to find people to work if they open up here, given that we're the second oldest or first, depending on...
That is not the concern that I've heard.
That's good. That's encouraging. And it's great to see that the business community is really queuing into the work that was done with the revitalization plan and is hopeful in seeing it come to fruition. Do you think that it seems to me that human nature is that no matter how much is going on with online and the growth of AI and all this stuff, that at the end of the day, we still like to look each other in the eye and have communication, and that shopping experience, that retail experience, is more than just getting a widget. It's kind of experiencing something, like this sense of place. Hey, I'm traveling to Freeport because I want to get a little retail therapy, but maybe want to hit some nice restaurants and just be among other people. And COVID seemed to really put a damper on that. But you were going through this transition period. There was a lot of vacancy in Freeport. I seem to remember just 3 or 4 years ago, the news reporting about all these places kind of closing down en masse.
Yeah.
Are you seeing now, though, that people are coming back because it's just human nature?
It is. We want to be together. And, and I think certainly those days of COVID taught us that. And I was so excited when it came to an end. I remember my dream list of things I wanted to do when we finally were able to get out. And certainly being together is so important. And I think really that satisfies so much of our human nature. I love sitting on Main Street where my office is now and just looking out and seeing people coming and going. It's just the way I feel like we're meant to be.
Yeah.
But coming to Freeport, again, we knew that we needed to change the reason you were coming, and it wasn't just for shopping anymore. When we talked to so many different consultants, we didn't seem like a charity case to them. It wasn't like we had a mill that burned down. When they looked at all the assets that Freeport had, they were pretty excited about our future. We are on the water. We have a small mountain. We have a desert.
Yeah, I know. A lot of people don't know this.
Yeah.
Talk more about the desert in Freeport.
I wish I could talk to you from all about the ecology of how it all came to be, other than I just know that there were a bunch of goats eating too much grass. But they could certainly
Really?
tell you the story better than I. But it is really a cool place. It was purchased recently, not too long ago actually, and they've really transformed it. It was already pretty magnificent, and probably again one of the reasons why I would come down even into high school to visit Freeport.
Yeah.
But it really is amazing. Now they've got mini golf there. There's beautiful yurts. They're
Really?
building a
This
barn.
is the desert of Maine, right?
Yes,
That's what it's called.
yes.
Yeah. I've been there before, but it's been a while.
They have
And
an electric trolley. As soon as your little one is a little bit bigger, you can take him on the trolley.
did they? Now, am I mistaking this for just like an idea I thought maybe should be there and it wasn't? But Did they have a camel at some point
Yes,
there? Okay.
yeah, they still do.
They still do.
Yeah, so
Okay.
good photo op opportunity.
Yeah.
They have a camel out in the desert.
So come to Freeport, get your lobster, and get your selfie with a camel.
Yeah.
And then go get your LL Bean pullover.
And right now, you can experience the world's biggest tent because LL Beans, with their renovation, they just opened it was a pivotal move and a really cool opportunity now to come to Freeport, where they've moved into an enormous tent.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So the entire retail store, including the little fish pond and everything, that whole thing is undergoing a renovation?
Yes.
All right. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit more, because to me, growing up in Augusta, which is like 40 minutes north of Freeport, my idea of Freeport was LL Bean. It was like Freeport is LL Bean. That's it. And then I remember in time, there was a pretty significant outbuilding or development, rather, of more retail shops and this walkable kind of outdoor area where you could walk in this courtyard and go to all these different stores, which I thought was really cool. But still, LL Bean was just Freeport.
Yeah.
And now they've done a big corporate headquarter expansion, right? But they're doing something with the retail?
Yeah, so they made an investment years ago to have their corporate offices here, which was really a fantastic change for Freeport, and again, I think that says something about the values of LL Bean. You know, they could have been anywhere for that, and they chose to stay in Freeport. And then after that, they decided to revitalize their own home campus, and spend millions of dollars doing so. Again, saying that they truly are staying here in Freeport, and they're going to make it bigger, easier to shop at, more experiential. It's a wonderful opportunity for the state of Maine. Really, it's more than just Freeport. It's, for the state of Maine, it's a great investment for us.
Did I see somewhere that at one point in time, Freeport had something like 2 million visitors a year?
Yes.
Is that right?
And if you were to go back even further, you would have found a number closer to 4 million. And that would have been more than a decade ago. The numbers have declined a little since that phenomenal time. But, I mean, there were times where the highway was backed up. I'm sure that was put a little bit of pressure on officials in town. They may not have liked that, but that's how popular things were back then. That it would just a rainy day and the highway's backed up because everybody's coming to Freeport.
So now there has to be another draw, and that's what you've been working toward, which is what's the new thing? And I'll talk a little bit about, is Freeport part of the Main Street Maine program through Grow Smart? Okay, so I know that Augusta downtown is, in Bath, for instance, and I think like Skowhegan. This is modeled after a national approach to revitalize downtowns, particularly in service center communities that were built up around mills or some other kind of industry that's gone away. And it's what's interesting to me about Freeport is the mill, if you will, was all of this retail that still exists, but consumer behavior has changed in such that it's almost like the mill closed down.
Sure.
Right? Am I characterizing that right? So we in Augusta have had to go through this process, this evolution where we said, well, what can we use all of these upper floors for? There's a lot more people that are working from home. There's definitely no demand for upper level retail in a downtown without elevator access and accessibility requirements of code that we have to abide by. So what do? And that evolution has taken about this tone of adding housing, over 100 units of housing really in the last 5 years in our downtown. So I'm curious, what's Freeport's approach to kind of like solving this issue? Because it seems that while there is a huge investment going on with LL Bean, which is definitely going to continue to help bolster that area, I mean, but for that, what would you do?
So when we were doing the downtown revision, the process, we spoke with 13 different consultants, and they all had different ideas, cool ideas, but the one thing that they all had in common is if we wanted a vibrant downtown, we needed housing. And I often think the blueprint for Freeport's future is actually its past. And historically, we had 1,500 people living in proper downtown. So as you described, we had retail on the first floor, and then on the second and even third third floors back then, was housing. It was a mix of apartments and actually some hotels. And so that, having that congestion and vibrancy of people really made a thriving downtown. A thriving downtown that you actually, I've heard from some of my elders, you didn't need a car. And oftentimes people would only use their car like on the weekend or whatever to do the big shop. But more or less everything that you needed was right downtown. And so I want to sort of lean into our history to create a new future.
Yeah, you brought some photos of what
I love these
Freeport
pictures.
used to look like. We'll have to figure out a way to show this to our...
I mean, I look at these pictures all the time. They still have tape on them because I move them around so that they are always in my eyesight. I want to look at them because it is really, I feel like those pictures speak so much to me. We were super successful back then, I mean, there are trolley lines in some of these pictures that I have currently.
And now you can't hang up a banner.
We can't hang a banner to say that we're having a blueberry festival.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes change is always hard, but if you can show people what Freeport once was and just try to say that we're trying to get back to what once was and a model that worked very well, might eliminate some of the fear.
Yeah.
We're not trying to become a new Portland. We are really trying to become what Freeport once was.
Mm-hmm. I think this is an interesting discussion because Freeport, in my opinion, as I'll call myself an outsider, even though I'm a Mainer, but we have these little cool territories and local control in Maine, which bring about, local decisions for code requirements and so forth. It's my understanding that the McDonald's in Freeport is the only one in the whole entire United States that looks the way it does, and that is strictly a function of zoning requirements. And I actually happen to think it looks pretty cool. But at some point, some of these things are at odds with the other things that we tell the world we want, like housing, for instance.
Right.
And maybe you can speak a little bit more about what your experience has been like through your efforts to try to get the community to pull them along. And then where is it now? Has everybody bought in, drank the Kool-Aid, we got to do this?
Sadly, the answer is no. I love to wear my rose-colored glasses, but we were really engaged as a community through the downtown revision. And again, my elders would say we were more connected than we had been in 20 years. The voices of all the residents in the business community were aligned. We captured a vision plan that we were in agreement to, and the number one thing being that we all recognized we needed housing. And so I was a bit naive to think that the process would go relatively smoothly, since there was such an excitement. We have people that had little notes on Post-its that you can see that their little written hands that said that this is what they wanted. So I was very disappointed to see the first housing project. That process was just absolutely heart-wrenching for me.
Yeah. I mean, we have had on a previous episode, people have been listening, Paul Peck. I've brought him up a few times in different shows because I think, it's not to keep talking about the same thing, but it's relevant to the discussion we're having. Here you have someone who's willing to take a risk, put financial money of their own money on the line, obviously with the hopes that there will be some kind of future return, but no guarantee of that. In a community that is saying, we've just gone through a process where we want housing, and then someone comes and says, here's a housing proposal, and it still dies. It's like, what the heck?
I know.
What the heck? I mean, what was the barrier? I mean, people were just like, we want this, but then no, it doesn't look the way that we think we want it, so no, or?
Yeah, I mean, Paul could have developed anywhere he wanted.
Yeah. He
has developed all over the place, and everything he's done is beautiful. He was such a thoughtful developer. The amount of time that he put in was impressive. It was 2 years. And he would his first rendering, got some feedback. He took that feedback so seriously. He had one building at that time, and he changed it to 2 to satisfy some of the feedback that he had received. He took it a step further and walked with the town planner around downtown to pick up historical features to add into the development. And that was as to the granite steps in front of our library, to the color palette of some of the buildings on Main Street. I mean, he was as thoughtful as a developer could be. I thought his project was fantastic and well suited for Freeport.
And then because it's my understanding it had a flat roof, they said no. Yet I'm looking at a photo on this coffee table
Yeah.
from probably sometime in the
And
1800s.
to be honest, I can't find many of these buildings that don't have flat roofs.
Right.
And I think it's kind of interesting. It's like, okay, well, this one has a little small triangle on it. Can we say that it's not a flat roof anymore?
Right.
Because we've got this one little facade. I mean, I know Freeport history pretty well, but I'd love to hear, why they added that. Maybe they had the same challenges we're having today.
It's almost like what we need is like a mass history lesson with everybody. Like, and that doesn't mean that our past should be the only way we do things ever. Obviously, there are some really bad things in our past we need to learn to evolve from. But as it relates to architectural design, some of the most beautiful buildings, historical buildings, even like the one that we're doing this podcast in now, was built in 1923. It has a flat roof. At one point, they used to put giant billboards on the roof of this building, but then Maine did, in my opinion, a good thing. It did away with billboards. It's kind of this really nice thing that you don't notice until you leave Maine and go to Houston or something, and they're everywhere screaming in your face. You're
Right.
like, geez, I kind of like not being yelled at with advertising all the time. But it still has a flat roof, Yet if I wanted to go and develop something new in this community, same thing. They'd be like, no flat roofs, because historically we've evolved now somehow to wanting pitched roofs. And yet that having a pitched roof, maybe people listening would know this, maybe they don't, but some of these things add a lot of cost to a project or bump it over some other thing in there, like a height restriction, so then you can't do it. And I think a lot of times folks who are not developers, which are the majority of people, see projects and they're like, well, geez, why don't they just like change it to this? Wouldn't it be easy for them to do that? But it's not.
Yeah.
Because those things cost money. Then it ends up costing the people who need to rent more because they have to subsidize what it costs to build the thing.
Sure.
And then ultimately that project just went away, right? Like now Freeport loses out, nothing's happening.
Yeah.
I'm not saying nothing's happening
No.
in Freeport, but as it relates to that project,
Yeah, it was simply embarrassing to me.
I bet.
Yeah.
Because here you are getting up, fervently fighting and championing this cause of we need more housing. The community comes together, agrees we need it. You start shifting in that direction, and then somebody comes and says, "Here's a proposal," and you're like,
Right.
"No, it needs to be orange, not yellow," or
Right.
something like that.
Yeah, and it was a small voice of people, but loud, that I feel ultimately killed that project. I was sitting in the town hall when it happened, and it was just heart-wrenching. So we've licked our wounds a little bit since then, and one of the things that I've heard as I've gone out to different conferences is this NIMBYism,
Yeah.
as we would say, isn't exclusive to Freeport. But what's the solution? How do we
Yeah,
move
that's
forward?
exactly what was going on in my head. What's
Yeah.
your message to the NIMBYs of the world?
YIMBY.
Yes, in my backyard.
Yeah,
instead.
absolutely. I think it's about leadership too. It's hard for leadership to vote maybe the way that they ultimately thought they would when they came into the room, if the room is filled with a loud, angry voice saying that they are opposed to something. So what we feel would help leadership is if we had a voice in the room of the opposite view, which most likely, and at least in that situation, would have been representative of actually the broader community.
This is an interesting thing that you're raising because often human nature is to not show up unless the pain of not showing up is greater than doing it. And so how do we get people who are like, geez, I really think this is a great project. I'm not going to show up because I'm hoping it goes through and I don't have anything to say against it. Normally people only
Sure.
show up when they're pissed off.
Right.
I mean, I had 12 years of public service. Very rarely did people show up just to say, hey, you're doing a great job, which we don't do it for that. But, they're like, hey, I've got this issue or something to fix. I mean, would you say that the most important thing is if you're in favor of a project, lend your voice to the discussion?
Yeah, we all want to be part of something too. So I feel like we are initiating a YIMBY group in Freeport.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
Tell me about this.
So it is a group of people that I feel we can keep them up to date on projects, so that they are, aware, because it's also hard to keep, to go to all these meetings and keep up.
Yeah.
So
how are you structuring that?
but people are passionate in Freeport. Paul's project didn't just bother me; it bothered the residents, because again, we
good.
captured their voice, and during the downtown revision, and it wasn't just the council that said we needed housing; it was the town that said the town and the town's residents.
Yeah.
The grandmas and grandpas hoping that their children can stay here or come back here. So there's a lot of passion in Freeport, and I feel that that's why they'd be willing to be a part of the YIMBY group.
Yeah.
And we want to structure.
What's this group called?
Well, YIMBY.
YIMBY
yes,
Freeport?
Yes, in my backyard.
Is there like a Facebook
we don't
group
have
for this?
no, we don't have our marketing quite aligned yet. But again, we want this group to support leadership. We want this group because we've learned that change in Freeport is difficult.
Yeah.
And we have to be persistent to carry forth the voice of the larger people. And so if we can have somebody, even if it's one person, in a meeting that represents the larger voice, then we believe that could possibly be a catalyst to help see some of this change happen in Freeport.
Totally agree with you. That's interesting. I wonder if that's something other communities could adopt, like you might have a conservation commission or a historical society. This would just be the name local municipality or state nationally. This could apply, like Freeport YIMBYs. And I'm part of that, and I go and show up to the planning board meeting when there's a housing thing up to say, yeah, we want this.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. I would really like to learn more about how that progresses and the impact that it has on future decisions. And I'm sure people like Paul, and there are other developers out there that this has happened to. I think of like Nathan Zanton, for instance, in Cape Elizabeth, where he had a wonderful affordable housing project, and they're like, we don't want affordable housing here. It's like, okay. I mean, it reminds me, and I talked to you about this earlier, I'm just going to talk about it now, of like this video that I saw of a woman signing a petition saying we need more immigration and we need more people moving here. And she signs a petition, and then they pull up a bus in front of her house, and folks who are immigrants come off the bus and start plowing up to the front door. And she's like, what's going on? And the guy's like, oh, they're going to stay with you. And she's like, no, not here, not here, not here. And it seems like there is this vibe out there of like, we need housing, we need housing, we need housing. But then you put up the exact proposal with all the economics and all the financing lined up, and everybody's ready to start with a hammer. And they're like, no, but not like that.
Right.
It just feels hypocritical.
It does.
And it seems like you, though, are not in Freeport just saying, oh, this is a problem. Sorry, it stinks we lost out on that person. You're kind of like turning that into a way for people to affect change by showing up not to say no, but instead to say yes, which is a kind of a unique phenomenon, in my opinion, because normally people only show up to say no.
Right.
That's great. So 1980s brought significant growth to Freeport, and then the development of outlet stores in L.L. Bean's flagship location. How do you think that shaped the town's development, and what can you learn about that time to move forward with the changes that have occurred since then?
That was a really awesome time. I actually had an opportunity to talk with one of the property owners who experienced that shift in the 1980s. His name's Mike Marino. We're fortunate to still have him as a property owner downtown today. And I met with him for lunch, and he told me the story. It sounds like it would have been a super awesome and exciting time in Freeport, but it actually was challenging. Freeport, before the outlet boom, was a much different town. Again, so you can see in some of these historical pictures, Freeport had, was 3-story buildings with mixed use housing.
Why was it there originally, I guess? So I want to back up to that. Like, what caused Freeport to become Freeport? Just
Well, we've been many different identities. Most of them all connected to the outside or shoemaking.
Okay.
And if you look back at some of the history of Freeport's proper downtown, we had factories downtown, of course, housing.
Okay.
Single unit houses. We were a very mixed, very tight community downtown. with all kinds of different uses. We even had an undertaker downtown.
Really?
Yes, actually underneath LL Bean. I'm just thinking about it. Maybe I can see it in one of these pictures.
Under LL
but
Bean,
yes,
yeah.
we had all kinds of
Did the people
different
only
uses
get
downtown.
buried in their bean boats?
That's a requirement in Freeport still today. I'm kidding. That's not true. I might, but yeah. So we had a lot of different things downtown that helped with that. So
yeah, and then and so there was. Because I think of different communities for different things. Like Augusta probably wouldn't be Augusta without the state capitol. Bath maybe probably wouldn't be Bath without shipbuilding. Portland wouldn't be Portland without the ports. But with Freeport, where was it? Just because it was on Route 1 and that was a primary travel corridor historically before the interstate was built? Or was there like fishing there too in the ocean or anything like that?
yeah, we had fishing, but I mean, when we talk about coming through in Route 1, I just think back to why the LL Bean decided to keep its doors open 24/7, and it was to capture that traveler, that person that was often traveling at night to go, to Augusta or maybe to Lincoln to go fishing, and they needed certain things to equip themselves for that journey, and so that's when LL Bean decided to keep their doors open so that they could cater to their loyal customers, and I think that's pretty profound.
And they were there before the 1980s, or when did they? Was it their store or building that big retail location that caused the other retail boom around it more so?
Yeah, primarily. I mean, they when they moved into that location, and then time would go on, and people wanted to be near LL Bean from the beginning
because it was a destination.
Yes.
Yeah. So now the destination is still retail, significantly LL Bean's growing, but more so housing if the NIMBYs would just stay home.
Right.
Or the YIMBYs come out more in force.
Right, that too. I mean, yeah, there are other challenges, of course, and being in development yourself. But I think, the cost of development isn't the reason why we're not having. It's a barrier in Freeport, but again, not exclusive to Freeport.
Yeah, it's more just about people coming out and being loud and saying no. Yeah. This has been a really interesting conversation, and what I'm wondering is, do you think there are ways in which other communities can replicate the work that you're doing? It seems like so humans don't do well being told what to do. And so you've engaged in Freeport more in a process of collaboration with the community. And obviously there are still things that need to be worked on. But would you say that you feel there's something that could be replicated elsewhere to try to start moving in this direction?
I think you hit on it 100%. It's all about collaboration. That's my favorite thing. I have a couple of skills, but really I love leaning into the skill set of others, working together. I think that is the key to success, and that's what I have found working through Freeport Economic Development and the Chamber and Freeport Friends. It's really finding, it's that collaboration and finding the strength in other people, and that really is where all the magic happens.
Yeah. So with Freeport Friends, that is a group that you started, right? Mm-hmm. Are you still actively engaged in that? Or?
Yeah. So we actually have 1,500 volunteers for Freeport Friends.
Really?
And so that's a makeup of primarily their residents.
Can't you just get them to all show up to the meeting?
I probably could. I'm in the fine line with using, I guess, my politics on my charity. But that Freeport Friends has really been what's allowed me to know the community as well as I do. Mm-hmm. Knowing the challenges that people face. And it's across all different income levels. People get sick and they need a little help for a little bit of time, or somebody's house, burns, and so we're really there for each other as a community, truly there to support one another, and it's been an amazing experience. Yeah. Just this morning, actually, I was driving my son to school, and he said, "Mom, isn't that the boy that Freeport Friends gave a car to?" And it really was. This boy that was driving this morning, I would see him and he would be skateboarding with his two little brothers behind him. Yeah. And I would watch him for years. And you could tell he was just such a good brother.
Yeah.
And then it miraculously, I had one of the Freeport Friends reach out to me, and she said, my daughter is off to college. She can't have a car. We have this car, and I'm wondering if you could help identify somebody who could use a car. And I was like, the boy with the skateboard and the two brothers.
Yeah.
And he was working at Bow Street, and so luckily I could find him.
Yeah.
And so I was able to reach out to him, and it was such a cool moment.
Yeah.
To be able to give him the opportunity of transportation.
Yeah.
And really cool. Like so he then went and got he's in his 20s. He's going to college at the University of Southern Maine. Never had a car, never had his license.
Wow.
So that car inspired him to go, and he got private driver's lessons, and I saw him driving this morning.
That's
so our
cool.
Community, though. Like, that's why I feel like we do have the power of the YIMBYs.
Yeah.
You know, we are really a town with a heart and really well connected with one another.
I'm glad you talked about this, because I think to some, perhaps even maybe listening to previous episodes, may feel like, hey, Freeport's a place to stay away from because they're opposed to this. Yet every time that I watch something going on, you know, I talk to people like John Egan, who we've worked with. And by the way, I was like, hey, Tawni's going to be coming on to the podcast. You got any questions I should ask her? He's like, yeah, she's a rock star. Just like, why Freeport when you could be anywhere in the entire world? But I think we've heard a lot of that today, and especially in what you just said, which is, hey, there is a sense of community that's been built up. We do want to support other people. And you know, you go through a period of a world pandemic like COVID, which really, in a lot of ways, we mentioned earlier, kind of forced us apart from each other. And you start to lose that sense of identity of connecting with each other and getting back to the fabric of the way it was in a lot of these historic photos where we were closer together, you know, because we didn't have then, at that time, suburban sprawl with cheap gas that forced us out and away from each other, and then the internet, which exacerbated that, so you do more from home, isolated from each other. And it seems that Freeport's like saying, no, time out. Like, we want to pull everybody back together.
Yeah.
Not only through housing, which is a huge part of it, but also this resurgence of more micro tail, if you want to call it that, smaller kind of sense of community of retail as well.
Yeah.
And then doing things like what you did for this young man, and I'm sure there's countless
Well, and I
other
didn't
stories.
do it. It's
well, not
Freeport
you, but the
Friends.
group. Yeah.
I sometimes feel like Santa Claus because I do get to actually like be the one delivering such gifts. But no, it really is our community, and they really are that connected. You know, I sometimes feel living in Freeport like I'm on a charming play, and I just feel lucky to be a part of it.
Yeah, it is a beautiful town. Every time I go, and especially just kind of walking around down there, it just feels very quaint. And normally for other towns that are like that, you're like on the ocean. I think of Portland or going further, Rockland, Rockport, Camden, you know, Lincolnville, not Lincoln, but
Right.
Lincolnville. You know, these little places that are along the ocean that we're familiar with. But Freeport, even though the ocean's kind of there, it's further away from the downtown.
Yeah.
And so it's like, why am I here? Well, beyond LL Bean, there's a lot more to it now, and it sounds like there's a lot more to come.
Yeah.
Which is exciting.
Yep. Yeah, and again, I think that the future for Freeport is very bright. You know, obviously we have a very well-designed Main Street and with the expansion, with the investment that LL Bean made into Freeport, that certainly ricocheted across the country to other retailers. But also with LL Bean expanding their footprint and having stores in other states around the country, that has also resonated with retailers. I attended a conference in New York City in early December. And I was very delighted to walk down Retail Row and overhear retailers talking about LL Bean. And I was like, wait a minute,
Really?
I'm from Freeport. I'm
Yeah.
LL Bean's biggest fan. What are you talking about? And they're like, oh, well, we're tenants in common at a strip mall in Massachusetts. And just 3 years earlier, I was at the same conference in Boston, and I was really surprised and blown away. Some people don't even know that Maine is a part of the United States. I know it's crazy. They think we belong to Canada.
Oh, yeah.
But then to mention Freeport, they're like...
Well, it's interesting. Somebody was saying recently, you know, why instead of Canada becoming the 51st state, why doesn't Maine just become the 12th province of Canada?
Right. But to go down to, now I'm going further away, go down to New York and just 3 years later and I'm overhearing people talking about LL
Yeah.
Bean. Like, that's a huge shift. I met with the CEO of Gap brand, Gap Incorporated. So that's Gap, Old Navy, Athleta, Banana Republic. And it was really
Do they
exciting.
still have a store in Freeport?
Yes, they have. So 3 of their brands are in Freeport.
Okay.
For 3 important stores in Freeport.
Yeah.
And the CEO had toured a lot of different real estate around the country, and he was in Freeport.
Okay.
And he said real estate's one of the number one things that makes a decision whether he closes a store or not. And so he visited Freeport. So you can probably imagine that it was a question, right?
Yeah.
Is he going to keep these stores open? And he is going to keep those stores open, and he said it was
why?
for 2 reasons.
Yeah.
Number one, the investment that LL Bean made in their commitment to staying in Freeport.
Okay.
And number 2, he thought that the downtown really was well appointed, as I had mentioned earlier. He thought it was a great looking downtown. So he is impressed with the future of Freeport and
That's
wants
great.
to stay.
Yeah, and it seems like, now that additional investment, like you're saying with LL Bean, that's the anchor, but it still needs all these different things to be thriving, because it can't just be, I'm getting off the highway just for the store, though it is for some. I think now when they get there, they're like, geez, this might be a community that I would want to live in. And pulling people more into these urban centers, less driving around, that's all good stuff for the environment, and it's good for business at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think most importantly, it's good for that sense of community that you just described.
Sure.
Because you just went by this young man today
Yeah.
who you helped, and that wouldn't happen probably in New York City, where
Right.
there's, not that that's bad, but I mean, nobody knows and has these kind of personal connections the way they do in these small communities.
Yeah, and that's just one of many stories that I could tell about the heart of Freeport. Yeah, and Freeport is so special. When I do look at housing developments in other communities, I'm always super excited because they're getting housing. But when I look out the windows in some of these towns that I'm in, I'm like, there's like, not the best view out these windows, although I'm very happy to have the housing. And then I think, could you imagine if we could have that kind of housing and be in downtown Freeport?
Yeah.
Like, that would be so tremendous. Like, years ago, many years ago, we had 1,500 people living downtown. We now have 300 people living downtown.
Is there capacity to get back to 1,500, and is that like a goal?
There is maybe not quite to that number with the way that things are as today, but to get it to a much higher number than 300, yes.
Yeah.
But a few of the housing units that we do have downtown, there's one on Bow Street above Wilbur's Candy Shop, and it was vacant for a very short amount of time, and I was invited in to see, and my God, I felt like Mary Poppins in the middle of London, looking out those windows. I'm like, what a charming town!
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so lovely. So I just think, housing in downtown Freeport is going to be very special.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, so the beauty of Freeport is somewhat it is largely, I should say, a function of intentional requirements around development and design and so forth. And now we're at a tipping point, I think, with the cost of doing things where we have to reevaluate, like, hey, we don't want to wholesale throw out our design requirements, because it's part of what does make it feel like, you can feel like Mary Poppins, because it's not just a bunch of Typar covered buildings that are half falling apart everywhere. But at the same time, making sure that if it's not perfect, that, we let that become the enemy of good enough and not have any kind of progress at all.
Yeah. And so much of development that I am seeing now is thoughtful. I'm not seeing too much out there that I think would be a devastation to Freeport.
Yeah.
And again, to look back on the historical pictures, I mean, we've had factories downtown. I'm sure that those weren't what those in the center of a postcard back then. And I think just the mix is what makes it work.
Yeah, I mean, Maine has a pretty robust industry around lobstering, but I think that if you were to drop yourself into 2025 and go to a local community that had never seen a lobster boat ever in the water out in the harbor and say, hey, we're starting a new industry tomorrow, and it's going to involve diesel-powered boats lined up all around here, people would be freaking out.
Right.
But it's like the way we do things, and so we don't. And it's interesting because you're living that in real life. And I mean, part of this is beyond just Freeport as a community to say, hey, this isn't, you're not in some kind of little microcosm of you're only dealing with this in your bubble in Freeport. This is happening everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it's encouraging to hear that there is a process that takes time. Mm-hmm. But if communities will have the courage to invest that time and those resources into this community conversation, along with some patience and understanding that there might be some projects that will come. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean, I mean, I'm not seeing you guys are all just throwing in the towel and saying, oh, one project didn't go, so we're done. You know, it's just on to the next.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm excited for the future, and I hope that, time has passed since Paul's project and it being in the reviews, we are getting, developers interested in Freeport again. And this time I hope that we can get them across the finish line.
Yeah, that's exciting. Well, I appreciate you joining us today, Tawni. It's been really a pleasure to meet you. This is the first podcast I've done with someone who I haven't met before in person.
What a leap of faith.
I think it went great. Yeah. So, folks have heard a lot today about what's going on, but if they want to learn more, where can they find out about your work and what you're doing?
They can come right down to Main Street and I'll be there. But also I can share my email and my phone number with you so that they can reach out to me that way.
Okay, great. And the Freeport Friends, does that group have like a Facebook page or something?
Yes,
okay, great.
Yes, absolutely.
So
we have a
people
Facebook
can check
page.
that out there.
Yeah,
awesome.
appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for joining us today for Housing Matters.
Thank you.